Hello everyone, this will be a brief overview of the guidelines and the topics document for the argument paper, which will be on pop culture evaluation. So I'll review that in a minute, but basically I wanted to do something different. We only have 2 weeks, so I can't do what I normally do, so I created a pop culture themed evaluation essay assignment. And there will be a rubric shortly, probably today or tomorrow at the latest. So don't worry, there will be a rubric, but it will be very easy to understand. But I wanted to go over the guidelines and the topics list in this video. So let's get started with the guidelines. And so due dates at the top, you're used to that. Same format as my other guidelines. Basic purpose of this is to evaluate something in the pop culture world, and that's a really big world, and you'll see choices for that in a minute with the other document. But evaluate if something is successful, is good or bad, is a band's best album, things like that. So that's what you're doing, and you do make an argument, but this is a fun way to write an argument paper. We're not looking at a hard topic like environmental issues, political issues. It's kind of the typically the stuff you will do in college. I wanted to do something fun, and I think you'll enjoy this. Skills are right there. You will craft a rhetorical argument using your knowledge. Mostly this is using your knowledge. However, number 2, under skills, you will need to use some basic internet search for this. Now, this is not where you look at academic journals. You don't need to cite sources. You're going to be using internet for like timelines. Say if you're looking at, you're writing your essay on the best film in the Star Wars franchise, which is on my topics list. You would want to probably, know when the first Star Wars film was produced, and what's the most recent, and how many there are, and how many producers have worked on it. So these are factual information, timelines, dates, basic known facts. So you do not have to cite sources for that. I'll get into that in a minute. And then you're going to be writing, instead of like, think of this as a formal academic paper. Yes, you still need complete sentences and you need solid paragraphs. You need to have it organized. I want you to free your mind up to write for an audience that might be, say, Star Wars enthusiast, if you're writing about Star Wars, or if you're writing about music, other writers in the music world, or consumers and critics. And so kind of free your mind to write in a little bit less formal of a style. However, typical grammar conventions and rules do apply. Okay, moving on to knowledge. This is really a different sort of paper than the other 3. They're all different. So this is, again, writing in a different situation. And you want to think about your audience who might be interested in this. So if, again, I'm going back to Star Wars, but if you're writing that a certain film in the Star Wars franchise is the greatest of all of the Star Wars films, and here's why, you will think about your audience of film critics, of Star Wars enthusiasts, people who love Star Wars, cultural historians, film critics, that kind of thing. So keep in mind your audience. The first thing you want to do is to select a category that you will write your evaluation essay about, and then within that category you'll have to narrow it down and actually think of a topic under that. But we'll look at that in the evaluations topics list that you see right here, and that's the second document that we will look at today. So and I want to make this clear. Just highlighted that you do not have to choose from my list. I'm really freeing you up here. It does need to be a serious topic that can be debated, and that is it has some depth to it. Okay, use your common sense on this. You're not don't go too far out in the universe for this. Keep it to something that is somewhat known and established. And so you'll see in my list of examples, but you don't have to choose from my list, but my list is a good example of what kind of topics will work for this paper. So moving to this note here, although there's no formal research, and I'm saying formal academic research, what I mean is like journals and studies and academic journals, that sort of thing. Um, that's not required for this, and I don't want you to think of not what this paper is about. However, you will, as you look back up here to go back to one of the skills you'll do, you will need to do some basic kind of news searches, and basic just internet searches for timelines, facts, people, producers of film, or when an album was released, or if you're looking at sports, like the years that Jordan played for the Bulls in the NBA, that would be something you would need to document, like when he was drafted and that kind of thing. If you were writing that team that Jordan was on the Bulls, and which is an option you can do, is the best NBA team ever, you would need to know the dates for that, when he was drafted, and like the years he played there and that sort of thing, the years they won championships. So, but these are all factual. My examples I just gave you are factual. That's factual information that does not require an in-text citation, and that's how in-text citations work. So if it's factual or historical, something that can't be debated, like the capital of Georgia's Atlanta. Michael Jordan was drafted by the Chicago Bulls in 1980. I think that was 5 or 4. Anyway, the point is, those dates, timelines, basic facts about people, those are not items that will be cited. So feel free to do searches and just use that information to incorporate in your paper. That will be part of this. You're not going to be totally an expert on your subject, though I hope you choose something that you do have a lot of knowledge on. So I also have an example here in the guidelines. The year the first Nintendo was released would not need a citation. That is a fact. It is known. It's not debated, so no citation. So I don't want you to think of this as a research paper. However, you will need to use the internet to look at timelines and basic facts. Okay, moving on. Criteria for success. You will see a rubric either today or tomorrow. I'll have that up. I haven't finalized that yet. However, it'll look similar to the other rubrics. The length of this paper is 1,200 to 1,400 words right there. Similar stuff you're used to. Let's look at so read that when you get a chance. Let's look at the topics list. So this is a document I created, and I will state it again. You do not have to choose from this. However, I want you to stick with these categories, basically, and find something under these categories. I've covered a lot here under the categories. So music, film, television, art, design, sports, gaming, fashion, style, food, culture. If there is a category that you really feel strongly about, you can certainly consider writing under that category. But this is kind of the bulk of the pop culture world. Okay, let's start with music. Some examples of topics you could write about. You might want to evaluate why an artist or band's album is their best. Like, what makes it their best album? Now, this artist or band would need to be someone or a band that has more than 2 albums out or more than 3. So you would have to, choose not a new artist, but someone who has been around for a while. Okay. Like if you're thinking of the pop world, Taylor Swift certainly has a lot of albums out. You could do that for her. Okay, that would work because she has so many albums out and she's so experienced. You can look at bands that are currently active, or you can look at Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or the Who, classic rock, or you can look at more modern rock like Pearl Jam, bands that are still playing, or it could be a band that's not still playing. The point is, it needs to be a band or artist that has enough of a catalog that you can actually make an argument this is their best album. If they only have 3 albums, that's a really weak argument. So don't choose a new band or new artist. Choose an established artist with 7 or 8 albums out. Okay, so and then new old, another under music here, is the kind of traditional countries of the 80s and 90s. Is that more authentic than today's country, and then hip hop today versus 80s and 90s hip hop and rap? You can read these under music later. There's some other ideas under film and television. Hey, what's the best film in a long-running franchise? So I've given you some examples here: Star Wars, Mission Impossible, Jurassic Park. There's a new one that just came out under that franchise, Toy Story. So I want you to, if you choose the film option or the best film in a franchise, I'd like you to choose a franchise that has at least 4 films in their list of films. So and then moving on, like you look at TV, TV series and animated series, and like what makes some of these long running, and I've listed some here, like what makes these so successful and why are they so loved, and why are they still watched, and why is it still interesting television, and like you find one you like. This list is not, all encompassing. So there are others. I just gave you some examples there of some long running series. And then best film in a genre, you can just pick a genre and pick a film and say why that is the best film. An example would be, some people say Braveheart is one of the greatest like action films of all time. You could choose that one. But that's simply as it's put there. And then art and design. So hey, you might like artwork. You could pick an iconic piece of art like Mona Lisa or something else, and say why it's overrated and why, or perhaps it's not overrated. I don't have that on here, but you could flip that as well. And then some other examples there in the art world, art and AI, how AI is harming art, or if you think it's helping, make an argument for that too. Greatest team of all time in sports. So, that could be college or pro, like what's the best team in a particular sport, fairly simple to understand there. And then individually, like what's the best player in an Olympic sport? So tennis, golf, all these other ones. You could do that one also for like best player in basketball if you wanted to, or best quarterback of all time. If you want to pick an individual in general, you could do it for a non-Olympic sport, which would be a team sport. Olympic sport essentially mostly means not entirely, but typically it means sports that are individual sports. NIL, if you're interested in sports, that's a big topic right now in college sports. Is that good for college sports, and why? Gaming. A lot of you are into gaming, and I think that's awesome. So you can choose like, hey, make an argument, evaluating, comparing, kind of like you're doing a review of systems, why Xbox is the premier gaming system, or PlayStation, or another one, maybe Switch or whatever you like. That would be a fun one to do if you're into gaming. Or you could do a game review. Like this particular game is the best in this genre of fantasy or sports or whatever. So that's gaming. And then fashion and style. I have some here. Critique a trend. You can really critique a trend and say if it's bizarre and will not stay around, or you and argue that it's overrated, or you could also say it's worthy of praise. So evaluate a designer. If you're really into like fashion, pick a designer like that has a really long career, successful brand, and analyze why that brand is still viable, like still popular today. That might be interesting to kind of trace the timeline of a brand, and why do certain brands stay around, why are certain designers so successful for many decades. And then like another one, if you're into fashion, like best celebrity brand, just pick one and say why this particular celebrity brand is successful and what are the components that make it successful. Food and culture, last one here. Food culture, I should say. You could evaluate a country's culture, like if you've been to a country, or maybe perhaps you grew up in a different country. Like there is some valid criticism of America's food culture, like fast food, and like we don't always use the best ingredients in America, and I think that might be changing a little bit. But like, what are some things Americans can learn from another culture in relation to food? Okay, and that could go a lot of different ways, but that might be something interesting to look at. And then also, if you want to be a tourist for this, place you have been to. This needs to really be a place you've been to, ideally. However, if you have a lot of knowledge about a place through friends or family, or you've read about a place, you could say that you make an argument for why Greece is the best place to visit for food tourism. Or you could say, you could make an argument for Italy, or whatever. So that's another one there under food. And that's it. That is the overview of the evaluation argument paper. Let me know if you have any questions. I will be posting the rubric document later today or tomorrow.